So whenever you talk about England, there's always one debate that always seems to like kind of rattle around in everyone's head is Gareth Southgate the right man for the job? So without any further ado, Benj, what's your opinion?
I think that there's two ways to look at this. So a lot of people will say, should Southgate have or be sacked as England manager based off the recent performances? I think the answer to that's no. I don't think the FA should sack him because I think he's done well enough to have the backing from the FA to keep him there. However, I do think that after the World Cup performance, which some people might say we've done. I don't think we've done amazing, to be honest with you. But I think after the World Cup performance, I feel there was grounds for Southgate to walk there, and the kind of whole should I or shouldn't I let me take some time away with my family was probably a good thing for him. But I don't think his, in my opinion, I think he probably should have gone. But maybe he's due one more tournament. Maybe Euro 2024 is his last one.
Okay, so I'll say my opinion. I don't think among our circles it's been up for debate. My opinion that I don't think Southgate has been the right man for the job. I liked the idea of Southgate when we first got him. Obviously, he'd worked with the youth team, he knew the players, and he was going to be the man that kind of moved away from sort of the old England guard, like the old England
Mm,
players, and usher in this new era of talented young footballers that were going to take over the England team. And I think he's been mildly successful. I think his downfall has been himself, in my honest opinion. And it came after the first World Cup that he was in charge of, where I think he had some tactical naivety. The first time, like the cracks started to appear for me, we played Colombia, and I remember it well because we was in Barcelona watching the game
yeah,
in a bar where one side of the bar was England fans and one side of the bar was Colombians, and we were watching the game. And it was a game where we were winning. We looked comfortable. We should have won that game comfortably. But then I can't remember if it was like a goal up. He decided to go defensive, and then lo and behold, Colombia get back in it and force the game into penalties. And it's
yeah,
like you look at the top managers, like you look at, for example, recent performances of teams like Liverpool against Man United, Man City sometimes when they play, Arsenal when they go a goal up, they don't stop. They push on, they keep going. They get two, they get three, they basically kill the game off. And I don't think Southgate's tactics are ever to kill the game off. He always like gets a goal up and then thinks right now defend it. And we've had the same issues in other times as well. Like was it? I think it might have been the same World Cup. Actually, we played Croatia in the semi-finals, I do believe.
yeah. When we lost,
Yep, and again we went a goal up. I think it was it a Trippier free kick that we scored.
yeah. When we
Um,
all believed that was the time we believed that was.
it was we went a goal up Trippier, and then suddenly it's okay, sit back and defend it. And of course, we ended up losing that game. And it's
Yeah,
it's kind of been a running theme for Southgate that I think throughout his time there is that he makes decisions that you don't necessarily agree with. Against Italy, we were winning that game. We then allowed them back into it, and it's like, you're in a final. I get it. You don't want to like you want to try and give yourself the best opportunity of winning, and then I can't understand why, if that's the case, you bring Rashford on for penalties.
yeah,
Like you bring Rashford on, like at the end of the game, they've got Chiellini, they've got Bonucci. They're not fast. They've been playing the full 90 minutes. Stick Rashford up top and let Rashford run at them. Saka was causing them problems all game. Or since he came on, like there was an opportunity there for England to bring on Rashford, bring on I don't know Jadon Sancho, bring on like these fast players who could get at their back four and really put them under pressure. But instead, he almost kind of went, okay, we'll just take it to penalties, which as an England fan or as an English person, like that England and penalties don't go well together.
yeah, yeah. Historically, they don't do that.
Yeah,
But the thing with defending though is that it's not like the olden days where you can just put bodies behind the ball, and teams automatically default to just pumping the ball into the. But it's not really like that anymore, and I think you've got to be clever, and you've almost got to play in an offensive type of manner to defend well. And I just don't think Southgate's fully got that, because when he attacks, I actually don't think there's a problem. I think we score a lot of goals under Southgate, but it's almost like when we come up against a more tricky opponent or a team perceived to be the same or better than us, that he has to just try and keep it all sturdy at the back and safe and protected and stuff. And it's just not. We were better on the front foot. You take France in the World Cup, the one just gone, losing 2-1. But I think if we don't sit back, especially for large parts, I think we can go on and win that. And we get the equaliser, and then also we go a bit more neutral, and it's just wrong football tactics from him a lot of
Yeah,
times.
I'd love to see him just go for it. I'd love just to see Southgate at some point to say, you know what, let's just let's just play attacking football from the start. I think like when you look at our defence, okay, there's question marks over people like Maguire, but no matter what Maguire's Man United form has been like, his England form has always been good.
Yeah,
John Stones is a good defender. Carl Walker's a good defender. Then whoever they decide to play at left back, Luke Shaw would be the number one, or you've got Chilwell. England have got a good back four where they can rely on, like they can take pressure. I feel like with the players that England has got, he kind of plays a bit more negative, where he'll play, for example, Calvin Phillips and Declan Rice in midfield, where both of those two players, like their jobs are to break up the play. Like Rice is, Rice is good at going forward, but he's more there to break up the player than try and get the ball like to the attacking players. And you've got Calvin Phillips who does the same job. It'll be good, to play one of them and maybe stick on another attacking player and another attacking midfielder maybe,
yeah.
and really take the game to teams. But I feel like Southgate's quite stuck in his way, where it's like, this is how I want to play, so this is how I'm gonna play.
And I don't think, on all accounts, I don't think that's a bad philosophy to have, because you'll find a lot of managers that do have their own unique way of playing football. Like you can say, obviously Guardiola he's got a certain style. Jurgen Klopp has got his own certain style, and maybe teams are figuring that out now. But I think with the choice of players that he has as well, I mean, defensively there's probably not much room, but I find him very stuck with the players that he picks, and maybe that could be an issue. Like, I mean, why is Calvin Phillips? I like Calvin Phillips, but why is he in the England team? Like, he's played like 5 or 6 games for Man City.
Well, I think like we can leave the Calvin Phillips because that's a point for a later question that I'm going
Yeah,
to bring up. But yeah, no, I agree. But like when you say Jurgen Klopp, for example, one thing that always sticks in my head is that Liverpool had Real Madrid in the Champions League final. We lost that game 3-1, and obviously, there was two goalkeeping mistakes. So what does Klopp do? He goes out, he buys a new goalkeeper, he shakes things up, he reinvents the team. It's like when England go into a final against Italy, you expect then, okay, I've learned, like as a manager, you'd expect him to go, okay, I've learnt my lesson now. I know where the mistakes were. I know how to fix them, and then he'd change them. But when you're looking at like multiple tournaments now, where you're going, oh, he went a goal up against Colombia, he then sat back. The game went to penalties. He went a goal up against Croatia, we sat back, we lost the game. We go a goal up against Italy, we sit back, we lose on penalties. And against France, it wasn't that France team, in my opinion, was there for the taking.
yeah, absolutely.
But we never looked like, don't get me wrong, in the first half against France, we looked like we could go out there and win that game. But it was like as the game kind of went on, we were dropping deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's not just the France game. Look at how we played against America. We were under the cosh in that game, and we were lucky to come away from that game with a draw. It just looked like they were more up for it than us, and it leads on to other issues that I have as well in terms of like tactics. There's a lot of time where I see Harry Kane drop into the halfway line to pick up the ball, and then suddenly you realise that you've got two fast wingers either side, and Kane hasn't got the pace to keep up with them when they're looking to get the ball in the box.
Yeah,
England look a lot more dangerous when Kane's in the middle. mixing it up with the centre backs, and then you've got your two wide players looking to get the ball into him. Whereas there's a lot of times when England are playing where Kane will drop really deep, and it kind of ruins our chances in that attack because then Kane's not up to speed with the rest of the play, and it's just something that's been there from the start. So
Yeah, I mean, if you look at stats, so I mean, Southgate's win percentage rate for England 70.3%. Which when you look over it, it's a good record, right? But
but
I
who have
think
you
the games
played?
that I mean, that is a decent question, but at an international level,
Yeah,
you're only going to get a handful of
but if
big teams, aren't you?
yeah, but it's easy to say, okay, we'll go out and beat teams like Moldova, Luxembourg, and teams like that. But if our win percentage against the bigger nations is a lot
Well,
less than
that's
that,
it, yeah.
then you're never going to win a World Cup unless you can beat a big team. And
And that's the one thing. Is it like last 9 in 14 of the so-called big countries or something along them lines anyway? And it just goes to show that tactically against a bigger team, whether he's worried, whether he just doesn't feel confident attacking, but it just shows that something's not right. And just going back to the Jurgen Klopp statement you mentioned about goalkeeper messed up, bought a new goalkeeper. Well, what did Southgate learn from losing against Italy in the Euros all the way to playing France in the semis in the World Cup?
that England, well, he should have learned that England are a much better team when we're attacking.
Should have,
But
in my opinion.
I don't feel like he did. I feel like against America, it was one example where we against America we didn't look like a team that was ever going to like really attack from the off. We showed glimpses of it. Don't get me wrong against teams like Wales, but it's like if you haven't got an England team that's up for a game against the likes of Wales or Scotland, then it's not exactly a good England team.
No.
But for me, it's like against France. That France team was there for the taking on that particular day. I thought if we'd have gone for them, we'd have won that game. But I just felt the longer and longer the game goes on and England aren't ahead, the less and less likely we become to win that game.
Yeah, if Kane obviously would have scored that second penalty, and I don't particularly blame Kane because 9 times out of 10 he bags them, so it's just one of them unfortunate things. But if he scores that penalty and it's 2-2, I think it's probably on our side then because I think France were worried.
Yeah,
It's only because we allowed them to have the ball and allowed them to push forward at the best of times that it's a simple ball in, and Giroud's always going to win headers.
yeah. I mean, the thing that worries me is that if we'd have pulled it back to 2-2, we'd have tried to take the game to extra time and penalties.
Well, yeah, I mean,
you
potentially, yeah.
you can't.
Potentially.
But so yeah, like in my opinion, like the first, I would have probably looked to get rid of him after the Euros. I don't think I'd give him this World Cup.
I think he had a claim to stay for the World Cup because we got to the final. We looked really good the whole tournament. And the young guns are through it. And maybe a couple, another year of maturing and playing at the club level. Like players like Saka, Foden would, Bellingham would kind of have another year of experience in the World Cup.
I mean, it okay. I mean, it's a good point, but then you look at what happened to England in the World Cup. I think we got to pretty much where the minimum of where you'd expect England to get is pretty much where England got. Was it the quarterfinals we lost against France?
Mm.
And it's like you think about it. If we'd have attacked France from the off, we'd have had Croatia. Which don't get me wrong, like Croatia are a good team. Like I think they're underrated a lot. People don't always like when you picture the team that's going to get to like the World Cup semis, quarterfinals. Croatia's not always mentioned, but they've proved now for the last few tournaments that they can get there. But if England beat France and then we play Croatia and then we play Argentina, I would have fancied us to win that World Cup. But I think that naivety crept in, and I think it's been kind of a recurring theme for him. I suppose the other question that you'd ask is, if Southgate was to go, who would you replace him with now that Hodgson's gone back to Palace?
That was my question, Roy Hodgson. Well, that would be my question. So if you would have got rid of him at that Euros, knowing the World Cup was literally the following year, who realistically would have came in?
I mean, I could throw one name straight off the bat, Eddie Howe.
Yeah, but
He wasn't
I'll
at
take
Newcastle
Eddie.
at that point, was he?
I don't know, to be honest with you, was he?
I don't think so. I think he would have been a free agent, so it would have been easy to. Well, maybe not easy. Depends on what Howe's plans were, obviously. But I think with what Eddie Howe has proved with Newcastle is that he can motivate a team. Like, okay, I know Newcastle have spent money; they've improved in certain areas, but you look at how the Newcastle team were performing before Howe took over, and afterwards, it's almost like he gave all of them a new lease of life. And I think him going into that England setup, he would have took them to that next level.
Well, yeah. Eddie Howe joined Newcastle 2021.
And when was the Euro final? It was 2020, wasn't it?
The Euros 2020. Yeah.
So we could
Was it
have.
2020?
Yeah, then you had the World Cup last year.
Yeah.
Well, winter this year.
So there was a very minute window and gap to get. I mean, Eddie Howe is my natural choice, and I think personally, with Newcastle, like he's done a very good job at Newcastle, but at some point they're going to want to take that next step and increase the brand, increase everything else. And I think Eddie Howe will probably become available, and that's why I think let Southgate do the Euros, because I don't think there's anyone else at the moment that can probably come in and do the job. And then after that Euros,
What about Gerrard?
what's in my opinion, I don't. He's done all right at Rangers. Won a season unbeaten, took the throne off Celtic, won the Scottish Cup, but proved nothing with Villa, which I thought he'd done a great job personally, being a Blues fan. But he's done nothing against Villa. But I don't. I mean, if you put Rangers or Celtic in the Premier League, they're not gonna. I don't think he would have finished in the top half of Rangers.
No, I agree. But
So
I think his attitude, I think the fact he's a former international, I know Southgate's a former international, but the fact that Gerrard's been in and around the England setup for a long time, the way he's worked himself up, I think with it's like I think a lot of the issue that people have with the likes of with Gerrard is that he brought a lot of players into the Villa team that perhaps don't belong in the Villa team. I mean, I'm not 100% sure if you're a Villa fan and you're watching this. Put a comment and let us know how you feel about Gerrard's performance as manager. But I think when you're the England manager, you've got like obviously a limited pool of players that you can pick from. Could he? Would he play attacking football, like the style of football that he would play? I think he wouldn't be. I don't think he would be a terrible shout. If you were looking to replace Southgate right now, I think.
I think there's. I mean, there's two things that, in my opinion, would back him up, and that's the fact that the players would play for him out of respect.
Yeah.
And second of all, I do think that he would go and play attacking because I think his passion might take over a little bit. Which, let's face it, 90% of England fans, that's what we want. We want the team to go out and would, rather lose 5-4 battling than lose 2-1 and sitting back for half the game. So, but he's just in that pool of potentials that you could classify him as because he's English. And for me, Eddie Howe's the one. I genuinely think Eddie Howe could win a tournament for us.
I think Howe could. I think we had the opportunity to get Howe. I think he would have took the job. Like he never had a job following on from Bournemouth. I think that if England came in and said, "Look, do you want to come in and take over?" I think he would have done it. And I think I agree with you. I can't see him being Newcastle manager forever, but he is doing a good job for them at the moment. So I can see them kind of going, well, he's had this season. Whether they make top 4 or whether they finish in the top 6, like depending on how they do. I think if you're the owners of Newcastle, you think, well, he's earned another season.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you're the owners of Newcastle, you probably give him another 2 years maybe because they've got to get in the Champions League and sustain it in there, which you can't. It's just, if you keep swapping managers, it ain't gonna happen, is it? But I think with Southgate though, if you flip it around and say, okay, Eddie Howe could come into England and do a job, could Southgate go to Newcastle and finish in the top 6?
I don't think so.
Could he go to Chelsea and put them in the top 4?
So, not at the moment. I think what you've got to look at is you look at the teams at the top of the Premier League. They all play to their own identity. Liverpool obviously have got the Gengham press, heavy metal football that they not this season, but typically they've become known for. Man City have got their sort of style where they're very possession focused, but they also press teams in like really high up the pitch.
Suffocate them, yeah.
Yeah. Even I think Man United are starting to find their identity now. That when Ten Hag first took over, he against the big teams anyway, he played a lot of counter attacking football. But I think we're starting to see how Ten Hag wants Man U to play right now, and that's starting to come true. I think you look at each team; they have an identity which works with the way that they play. I think if you take Southgate, put him into one of them, he would probably do what Potter's doing at Chelsea. I think he'd struggle to sort of put. But personally, I don't know what his identity is. He seems like a very old fashioned type manager, where he'd go in there and he'd be like, right lads, we're winning 1-0. Shut up shop now. Let's hold
Mm.
this and get the 3 points. Which I know back in the day Chelsea won the league by playing that kind of football. Arsenal have been called boring Arsenal in the past for playing that kind of football. But I don't think that style works nowadays.
I mean, it doesn't. I think you are right. I think the football's moved on dramatically from the days of that, and that's why I think managers like David Moyes just aren't gonna. West Ham's probably the highest he'll get now, and you could probably say it was a good season from last season getting to the Europa Conference. Probably a fair argument, but I don't think you're ever going to see a manager like David Moyes win the Premier League.
I think it's the difference between a top Premier League team and a bottom Premier League team is that
Mm.
you have some managers that are very good at surviving, like knowing what it takes to avoid relegation, and then you have some managers who will come in, they'll completely change a club over from top to bottom, reinvent them, put their own stamp onto that club, make them play a certain way, and suddenly they're battling for you know top half of the table, top six, top four, and for the title. And you look at the teams at the top, they all seem to have that manager with that identity, and I think Tottenham are struggling because they've had a lot of managers with a lot of identities, and they don't really have the time to implement those identities. But the teams that have kind of been stick like you look at Arsenal, for example, it was last year that people were saying Arteta should get the sack.
Yeah.
He's been given time to perfect his identity, bring the players that fit his philosophy, and now it looks like they're probably going to win the league. Liverpool, they've yeah, you can argue, well, Klopp's earned his like Liverpool are going through a bad patch now, and a lot of you see the press saying that Klopp could leave and everything else, and a lot of people say, yeah, but Klopp's got enough credit in the bank to be able to stay at Liverpool, but you know. Liverpool wasn't always winning leagues when he first took over. They lost Champions League finals. They finished, I think it was fourth in his first season. Liverpool, they still stuck with him, knowing there was a long term plan. And I think that's kind of what you got to have in mind in the Premier League. But we'll move it back to the England debate. And